So welcome to another edition of Carnivore Bites. I'm your host, Jeff Sherman, along with Dr. Eric Lopkin and our guest, Keith Reynolds, a reoccurring guest. So time flies. Maybe a month ago, you had a seminar in Stanford, and it was about skills and really aligning yourself with the 21st century. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how it went?
Yeah, we had about 13 people, and 7 of them completed, and it was an intensive 4-week program to get certified in inbound marketing, email marketing, social media marketing, and SEO. You got certifications from HubSpot and SEMrush, 2 digital marketing platform companies. And they're free and just amazing curriculum. And so we had a small grant from the city of Stanford to work with the Stanford Library and the Stanford Partnership to build a cohort and help guide people through. So we had an intro course or intro evening and then a Q&A session 4 days later on Thursday. And people then did self-study throughout the week and got certified. And the feedback was tremendous. Learning these skills are the kind of thing with a little bit of experience, you can be making $30 to $50 an hour very quickly. And so the hypothesis was that we could do economic development by teaching people skills that are relevant and in demand. And it was a pilot. So I'm actually sending out the survey tonight, and we'll see how the feedback goes. But it sounded like it was good. We had a little graduation party, and thanks for letting me recap here. I hope to do it again soon.
No problem. I know, Dr. Lopkin, you're big on that, and we've talked about it before, but just kind of recap things. Things are kind of changing a little bit in the world in terms of these 4-year degrees and master's degrees and all that kind of stuff. And maybe what Keith is, I totally believe what he's saying is accurate, that isn't it more skill-based, getting the skills you need, and you don't need to worry about modern history and the philosophy of Nietzsche?
Yeah, well, I mean, if you're looking for a job, yes, these certifications are a lot more important than a 4-year degree. Most of the large tech companies have already announced they're not even looking at degrees anymore. They want to know that you can actually do the job. And this is a trend that's going outside of just tech. Companies want to know that you can do what needs to be done to get the job done. And
interesting, though.
A lot of that is also
Dr.
communication skills.
No, I agree with it, but it was, the degree was everything, just 20 years ago. Now it seems like, I know, it doesn't have the same relevancy as it once did.
No, because 20 years ago, 40 years ago, when you went to college, you were being taught to think. You were being taught to solve problems. Higher education has lost touch with the outside world. Academia is very insulated, and they have lost touch with what's going on in the real world. So if you get a 4-year degree, especially with the speed of technical innovation now, a year after you get that degree, it's virtually useless.
Keith, any comments on that?
I would say that I have 2 kids college age, and neither of them took the college path. They've gotten vocational, one's in construction, one's in the restaurant industry, and they've been able to make a living, but they're taking their spare time and studying what they like. And they've been going to junior college to get their freshman and sophomore year under their belt without breaking the bank. And they're actually thinking about going to a strong 4-year institution for their last 2 years of school. But they're taking longer to do it, and they don't want to come out loaded up with debt, but they have things that they can study, like Nietzsche, right? If you do it because you want to.
But they're not doing it for the purpose of a job. They're doing it to study things that they enjoy. And that's actually something that Steve Jobs used to talk a lot about. He did not go to a programmatic college. He took classes here and there on things that he enjoyed. And of course, very few people.
Look what that got him.
Right. Very few people would debate whether or not Steve Jobs was a success or not. He had the skills to do what he wanted to do. And then he went to college here and there, audited classes, took a class here, took a class there, basically ignoring the structure of the 4-year degree, forgetting about required courses, and just took the courses that he was interested in.
Absolutely.
Yes. I wonder if that's not the model of the future. Yes, Keith.
I was going to say his love of fonts led to the Macintosh and its leadership because he loved fonts. He studied design.
Well, moving to another subject, something that came up in the news, it was so weird. I had to throw it out there and give this to you, Keith, and Dr. Lopkin, is mining cryptocurrency. That supposedly takes like supercomputers to do this, and I think I didn't even know completely what it was all about.
Is that my softball?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, in order to create the cryptocurrency, they need computing power to put it out on the chain, and they're using a distributed model where anybody can set themselves up as a miner and donate their compute power to create the cryptocurrency, and they get a piece of the what they create and put into an account of their own. There are small units. I have one for helium that I'm installing, and I can make $50 to $200 a month, depending on my location. They're setting up a network of IoT. Is
it a growing trend?
And well, it's a changing trend, right? It was being done a lot in China, and now China's cracking down on it. And so there's a company I was following, BTBT is its trading symbol. They've got all of their computers in transit from China to be set up in the United States now because of that. So you can set yourself up as a miner. You can stake your currency and use these ways to earn more cryptocurrency is the payoff for doing it.
Interesting. Dr. Lopkin, any thoughts?
Yeah, a lot of it depends on where you are. I mean, I'm actually surprised to hear Keith saying that he's going to be doing it, because here in Connecticut, the price of the power that it costs to run the computer is so high that your profit is very low. Whereas if
these little units are small Raspberry Pis computers that you put next to your router, and it just runs a little async chip. I think it's an async chip that is special. The whole unit has been special purpose to mine a small amount, and it's not a big power draw. The machines are free, and they're trying to get geographic coverage of these machines. They're all over Silicon Valley right now.
Interesting. I wonder, we'll have to take that up again. I wonder if that's something that's not going to get more.
Dr. Lopkin is right. The way that you read about it, most companies have huge warehouses of hundreds of machines. There's one out in Seattle. Some kid lives in a warehouse, has a skateboard park set up inside the warehouse, and it's just filled with computers. And he lives there practically 24/7, and it draws a tremendous amount of power when you do it that way.
And the final subject for the three of us is the coronavirus, and the variants are kind of just when we thought we were fine, we're not so fine, or potentially not so fine. And I guess, Mr. Reynolds, my question to you and Dr. Lopkin is, what are the personal and business repercussions if we go into another lockdown, Mr. Reynolds?
Well, I have spent the last week working with my clients that have business events and meetings and their digital production of promoting those things. We're all working on a plan B right now, so that if things change drastically from the current optimism, I think you still go out, to events. A small percentage of people are wearing masks, but growing. There's a little bit of hesitancy, but people are still enjoying going out right now. I was in New York City this weekend. It wasn't full, but there was definitely activity going on. But I think, companies are starting to say, hey, what if the Delta variant or some other variant comes online? What are we going to do? And so I think companies are sort of resigned that this is going to be the way it is for a while, and we're going to have to be able to be prepared to go hybrid or virtual. And we just have to make that part of our planning, is to have a contingency in everything we do.
I would agree with that. And how about the personal costs? People, barely got through the last lockdown. What do you think it's going to mean? I mean, I guess there's no choice, but there has to be some personal repercussions, correct?
Well, I heard that even Hormel, I think it was Hormel, is now going to be testing and vaccinating and paying $100 or $200 to their workers, and building it into the work environment, as opposed to what happened to the meatpacking places before. So, I think the companies are changing. We're going to have to figure out how to live, whether it's with a mask, whether it's, a balloon over our head or what. And some jobs are much harder to do than others, but back to the digital skills, the more you learn that, the more you put yourself in a position to be working at home.
Yeah, and I think it's important to point out that earlier in the week, the Biden administration did say they have no plans for a lockdown. And even as things get more severe, they are looking to avoid a lockdown.
Well, that's hopefully good news. Mr. Reynolds, we thank you so much for being on the show. Any final thoughts?
Oh, I just love coming on your show. I appreciate the opportunity to share some of the things that I pick up during the week, and always learn things listening to you guys. So much appreciated.
Well, we appreciate your presence on the show, and we'll have you back soon.
Thanks a lot, guys. Good luck with the rest of the show.
Take care.
Bye.
Well, Dr. Lopkin, that was a good segment with Mr. Reynolds, always is. However, I'm a little troubled on what has transpired. Maybe you can fill our listeners in on what's happened to Carnivore Radio on YouTube.
At the end of our podcast, obviously, we list a number of the places that carry the podcast. One of the ones we don't usually mention is YouTube. And we are on the Xvadio YouTube channel. It is one of the smaller outlets for us. But last week, YouTube decided to pull the episode of Carnivore Bites podcast off of their platform, because they disagreed with what we had said. Now, specifically, they told us it was about what we said about COVID and about masks not necessarily being effective. Now, they gave me a whole song and dance about how they are following the science, and if information contradicts the local authorities or the World Health Organization, they feel it's their job to pull it down. Well, here's the thing. We said that masks were not terribly effective. Now, this information came from Dr. Michael Osterhorn, who is President Biden's former COVID-19 advisor and a top epidemiologist. And he literally says, we know today, this is a direct quote, we know today that many of the face cloth coverings that people wear are not very effective in reducing any of the virus movement in or out. Okay.
Actually, I've heard that. Just to kind of dovetail on what you just said. I've heard that. I don't exactly know the source, but basically, people are wearing non-surgical certified masks, and they have little or somewhat limited effectiveness.
All right. If you are wearing an N95 mask, a KN95 mask, or a surgical mask, these are effective. 99% of the population is not wearing these. They're wearing cloth masks that they picked up at Target or these disposable paper masks. Now, this information comes from, again, his name is Michael Ostenhorn, and aside from being part of the Biden administration, he's the director of the Center for Infectious Disease Research and Policy at the University of Minnesota. Now, I find it terribly interesting that YouTube decided to disagree with us and pull us down, but their parent company, Google, did not. And we are on Google Podcasts. Google thought this information was fine, which tells me that YouTube is not looking at accurate information. YouTube has a long history of taking down people who are not promoting their liberal agenda. So I have a feeling it has more to do with the fact that we are actually telling the truth rather than kowtowing to what they want people to hear.
Well, I also am a little surprised, quite frankly, because I remember our show. Pretty benign. I don't think we went, as far as I remember, going out on a limb, with, crazy helicopter theories. I think it was a passing comment that you might have had, and to be banned, to me, that's a little scary.
It is, because they are taking it on themselves to decide what truth is. And clearly, because we have the scientific advisor telling us that what we said was accurate, they don't know what the truth is. Now, we don't talk a lot about our own backgrounds on this podcast, but given the information that caused YouTube to take us down, I think it's important to mention the fact that I worked in the pharmaceutical industry for 5 years, 3 years of which was fact-checking medical research. I have been a journalist since the late 1980s. I have sources that YouTube will never have. So the fact that they think they know what's going on and deemed it proper to pull down a podcast on our channel is absolutely ludicrous. And it goes to show, there was a story on Fox. YouTube is obviously not the only one who's been pulling down things and censoring information. The New York Times had an entire library of back articles that they pulled down. Why? Because it turned out they were paid for by the Chinese government. And YouTube was actually, in this investigation, one of the channels that was named as getting payments from the Chinese government to spread information.
Interesting. Well, for me, it's very disconcerting because it was something that I thought was over the top, or he went a bridge too far. That's different. I barely even remember us mentioning anything about mass technology and their effectiveness. It was,
I had to go back and
I
had to go back and re-listen to find the comment that they were referring to, because in a half-hour podcast, this line of interest that they found so disconcerting took up about 15 seconds.
Yeah, it's a little troubling. Anyway, moving on into the political area, They got the January 6th hearings, and I know it's a surprise to you, Dr. Lopkin, but every member on that committee voted for impeachment. Isn't that a shocking detail?
Oh, yes. I'm terribly surprised that Pelosi only put people on the investigation that voted for impeachment. Again, another group that cares nothing about truth but wants to get their point of view out.
Yes, I thought that was kind of you're not really looking. If you had a little bit of diversity of opinion, it's a show trial. Again, I said it on last week's podcast. I'm very critical of what Trump did. I think his behavior over the last couple of months, or even more than that, even during the pandemic, was less than presidential, to say the least. And I also think that he cost the Republicans Georgia, especially in the final months of his presidency. And what he did on January 6th, I think, was at least at minimum a lack of judgment. But we can move on from that. Another cheery subject is there's maybe a resurgence. You were maybe too young for this, but I do remotely remember it, a resurgence possibly of Legionnaire's disease. It's in Rhode Island and like 3 other states. So we got that to look forward to, Dr. Lopkin. Isn't that exciting?
Oh, that's fantastic. And honestly, that could very well be part of the lockdown problem, because a number of doctors recently have come out and said that one of the side effects of everybody being locked down for so long is that our immune systems are no longer working at full capacity because they haven't been exposed to the daily germs and everything that we usually get. So we need to boost our immune systems to keep things like that from getting out of control.
Agreed. And finally, an interesting point. Do you agree, Dr. Lopkin, that it's independents that usually sway the election locally, nationally, correct?
Usually it is, yes.
Well, Biden, since April, has dropped 18 points among independents. And I'm looking at the math, or thinking about the math. Let's just say that's a very significant drop, because let's say he had 55% or 60% of independents in April, potentially so. I don't know the exact figure.
Right.
18 points. That's like a 37% drop.
Well, that's with independents. Even more troubling for the Biden administration, though, is that his approvals dropped 10 points with Democrats.
I did not know that.
So he doesn't even have his base sewn up. People are realizing that this presidency has been a bad joke. And I mean, part of it is Biden himself. A big part of it is Kamala Harris. Now you're hearing a lot of criticism about her because, as I'm sure all of our listeners know, over the past 24 hours, the New York AG found that Andrew Cuomo was not only guilty of sexual misconduct, but he actually violated state and federal sexual harassment laws. And Biden came out and said he should be impeached. He should resign. Almost the entire New York legislature has said he should resign. And yet Kamala Harris, our first female vice president, has been silent. She has not criticized him.
Well, she's been silent since her trip to the border. I believe she has been silenced because I believe she has the Hillary Clinton factor, which goes against most of the phenomenon about people's interaction. Most of the time when you have encounters with people, the more encounters you have, they might not be your best friend, but you develop some degree of likability towards them. She and Hillary are just the opposite. I think she's been silenced. And speaking of Cuomo, we'll finish with that. Our Governor Lamont in Connecticut, called for his resignation as well. I believe he is pretty much done.
Most of the governors have called for his resignation. He has said he's going to fight this. Honestly, I don't think he's got a leg to stand on. The New York legislature already has the votes to impeach him and remove him from office. The AG may very well file criminal charges against him. So he doesn't have a leg to stand on. And as a side effect of all of this, he may also take down his brother, because Chris Cuomo over at CNN was found to have crafted some of the statements that Andrew Cuomo made. And aside from the fact that as a reporter on CNN, he's supposed to be unbiased, which it's a definite conflict of interest, and he may end up losing his job. We may not hear from either of the Cuomo boys.
Well, let me
all this
last
is done.
comment I have to have. The last comment, Dr. Lopkin. If he loses his job, I believe CNN couldn't be happier. In other words, there's a good excuse, because when his brother was strong and and a pillar of decency and blah 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 blah, all the above, it was tough to get rid of his brother, the genius. But I think his show is unwatchable. It's incoherent. And I think they would use this as an excuse, the perfect opportunity to purge him. And not because they were so outraged in what he might have or may or might have not have done. It's because his show sucks and they can't get in his ratings. I think Carnivore Radio might have higher ratings.
Well, at this point, CNN's ratings are so far in the toilet, they don't actually need an excuse to get rid of anybody. They can just say, look, we need to boost our ratings. You're out of here.
We'll see. Well, we move on in spite of our challenges, and we're on many all the networks that pod listeners would be interested to access us. Our listenership is increasing, isn't it,
yes,
Dr. Lopkin?
You can find us on the Carnivore Radio website. You can find us on xvadio.com/podcasts as part of the Xvadio Podcast Network. We're on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Amazon Music, Audible, and wherever you find podcasts.
Thank you, Dr. Lopkin. Thank our listeners.
We'll see you next week.